weirdest world of all. Goodness in this feed. Yeah, it's kind of neat when the prison TikTok people all hit me up. We have like a back channel chat that's kind of enjoyable. So a bunch of people that did time in prison and then have gotten out and are now doing really neat, meaningful things with their lives, which I'm really grateful for, because I think otherwise we could have ended up on another path. And I think a lot of times having each other's back and having that shared experience, both of the kind of trauma of prison, but also of the, the positive things, like Carrie being a best-selling author, Morgan doing the work she does with Beats Overdose. Like, it's just a meaningful thing. But I have to figure out some way to actually do an activity, and I'm not sure how to do that. Thank you. I'm trying to figure out a way to humanize people in the criminal justice system, as well as make sure that the resources are there for victims of crime, that it's not a one-sided thing, because I think we have this false dichotomy of saying you're either pro-criminal justice reform or you're kind of pro-victim. Yeah, I've thought about trying to do a book. I wrote a book proposal. I submitted it, and they wanted to use a ghostwriter. And at the time, I was still like, no, I want to I want to control my future, and I want to be able to tell my story, and I don't want somebody else to be able to change. And then I realized I don't actually have time, so I should probably get back to them about the ghostwriter. But now, if I do it, I want to do it right. Like, I want to be able to share, my story and the kind of history. And originally, I thought I had to do it now. I had to figure out a way to get this story down on paper. It wouldn't be relevant anymore, because I'm a year out now, and I thought that wouldn't help. But I've talked to a couple of people, and what they said was the kind of what's happened since I got out of prison, like getting out of prison, starting on social media, being able to start a nonprofit, being able to speak at universities, being able to go on national TV. Like, that's a part of the story too. And I hadn't really thought about that, because it's just been such a whirlwind. It's been hard to consider just how abnormal it is. I was actually talking to somebody this morning who runs a halfway house, or a resource service thing in another state. And he was like, bro, you realize that's not a normal experience. And I was like, yeah, it's really not. I didn't expect any of this. And it's just a process of figuring it out. But I don't know. Yeah, so we had a couple guys. Brother Chavies was one of the really inspiring guys. He wrote 2 books while he was in prison. They weren't great, just because I think he had kind of a limited background or limited access to information. But he took the time and had the energy and did the work. So what a lot of people would do is they would either write it all down by hand and then send it out. And some of these services are predatory. They'll publish your book, they'll write it, but they're going to charge you a ridiculous amount of money. So people's families will do it, or guys will hustle to get the money up to do it. But sometimes it's just a benevolent, kind of person will say, okay, I'll type this up for you. But since we got the tablets, or we got JPay, people can actually type something up on the tablet and then send it out in a 6,000 character email. That was how I did my clemency petition. This is a petition that got me out of prison, and I wrote it all on this tiny little, basically what's a decommissioned phone. So I typed it all up, I made all my changes, and then I had somebody format it for me and then print it out and send it to the office, because back in 2019, that was still how you did a clemency petition. There was no online component, there was no way to do it, and thankfully they updated that. So now it's all done online. But then the problem with that is, if you're in prison, you don't have anybody out there, you still have to do it the old way. If you imagine trying to write a book by hand and then have somebody be able to read it, or do a clemency petition asking, kind of fighting for your freedom, and having to do it all by hand, or having to go to the law library and type it up on an ages old, typewriter. That was an experience. Yeah, I'd grown up using computers. I was that kid in elementary school who was in the typing class. And then I went to prison. We had these ancient typewriters, and that was a big thing. And they even restricted the typewriters we had, because some of them had the basic word processing, where you could save documents or save just general forms. So that was great, because then we could just fill in information later. And then they took those away because they said they were a security threat. And it's all these people are getting out of prison to get cell phones and live their lives, and you're telling them a typewriter is a security threat? And years and years and years ago, you used to be able to get a typewriter for yourself, but there were so many issues with the noise, just you used to be able to have speakers for your TV, and now all the TVs are supposed to come muted, even though they don't. Yeah, so we got JPay tablets, or the JP5s or JP4s or something, back in 2015. And that was one of their positive things in a way, but also one of their negative things. Because it allowed for email. You could write an email and then sync it up to the kiosk, and it would send it out or download your emails. but it also really kind of set out the class divide. Like if you had the money for that and you had the money for games you could get on there, you had the money to send emails or buy music, and other people just didn't. And people were more wary about giving out their JP5s because it had all their emails on there than they were about CDs. It used to be you could just like get a CD from somebody and listen to new music, but unless somebody really trusted, they were not going to give you their player because it might have a message or pictures from their mom or their girl or somebody like that. And that really just kind of changed the dynamic of people sharing and music and things being able to get around. But at the same time, it was a positive. It was crazy to see a whole prison full of people strung out playing like app games or like Subway Runner or something, like just staring down at it. It was a different experience for sure. But I mean, I guess the idea was, you give people entertainment, you give people something to do, and they're doing that rather than, getting into fights or stabbing each other. It was an experience. But. So I've never done a YouTube live. I only have, a certain number of people that watch the videos. I had a couple go really viral, but not many. Yeah, so you, when you first got them, you had to buy them for $50. I just got a call from a buddy today, actually. They're taking all their tablets away to give them JP6s, but they still don't have like talk on the tablet. So most of the jails, at least in Virginia, if you go to a jail, you do your phone calls and your video visits on your tablet. Like you just plug in headphones and that's how you talk to people. Now you don't have the issue with phones. Like when I was at Buckingham, we had 6 phones for 64 people. So basically a phone for every 10 people, and you still had problems and issues over the phone. Unfortunately, when I went to Coffeewood, you had 82 people in a dormitory, so it's already like stressful because you got all these people in an open room and no privacy, and then you only had 4 phones. So now instead of a phone for every 10 people, you got a phone for every 20 people, and we had more problems over those phones than anything. And I was lucky because like the first one I went into, I knew a dude who was imam, and he ran the Muslim phone, and he was like, yo, you're good. The next place, it was just about finding your own way. Where was the class divide? Yeah, I mean, that's a big issue. There was a huge amount of privilege, and that's really a big part of my story is I had opportunities and support and services that other people didn't have just because I came from a middle-class family. And a lot of people who came from poor families, a lot of people who didn't have that same support weren't able to succeed in the same way because if you look at the challenges they had, like, I didn't have to scramble. Like I had little hustles and I always worked, but that was more to like do something meaningful and spend my time in a meaningful way. Some people needed that to make sure they had toothpaste. Some people did that to make sure they had something to eat at night. And just the difference in that, like I could take a job that was the best job for me even if it didn't pay the best. Or I could take a job that like taught me the most but not have to worry about more hours. Other people were like slaving away in the kitchen because it was the only job they could get for 60 hours a week. So you're doing 60 hours a week in a 110, 115 degree kitchen just to be able to have enough food to eat. Like that's a very big difference. I was able to go to college because my family was able to pay bit by bit by bit to go to college, whereas this dude's struggling. He can't even get out to get to the library to get a book because he's got to work 60 hours a week in the kitchen. So it was a really unfortunate thing. And one of the kind of big parts of my platform has been to say, if we want more success stories, looking at my own experience, we need to give people more of the same opportunities and experiences that I had because I think we'll have a whole lot more success stories. Because it's easy to like kick somebody when they're down or tell people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But what I saw was I consistently saw people who had privilege or had support succeed, and I consistently saw people who didn't fail. The one I think of is there's a guy who came in, he was about the same age as me. We had about the same amount of time. I think he had 30 years instead of 32. And the people that he was around, the neighborhood he grew up in, everybody's like, yo, bro, you got 30 years. You need to make an example of somebody. You need to do something. And about a year in, he stabbed somebody. He stabbed him really bad. And so the people around me had been like, you need to get an education, you need to stay out of trouble, you need to prepare for the future. And the people around him were dragging him down. And he ended up going up to Sussex or Wallens Ridge. I don't even know where he ended up. But he got shipped off for that, and he got street charges. And it's like, so his life is now negatively impacted by the lack of opportunities or by the people who was dragging him down. And that's pretty common because, unfortunately, I saw the best and the worst of people, especially as far as community. I saw people who would come together and lift each other up and support each other and educate each other. And I saw people who would tear each other down. It's really kind of funny. Like the drug game when I first went in was like, it used to be kind of like respectful. Like it could be cutthroat, but it was respectful. And by the end, it was all dudes like telling on each other and going crazy and everybody trying to undercut somebody. And it was like the whole no honor among thieves thing or no honor among criminals. And I don't know, it was unfortunate to me. And I thought it was really negative to see even like the parts that used to be unhealthy or not ideal, having a certain amount of respect or kind of like camaraderie turning into just like cutthroat. But I don't know. My hope is that it's changing. My hope is that we're moving in a direction of something more positive, and it doesn't seem to be happening with the state. It seems to be happening with the prisoners, and the prisoners are just tired of being sick and tired. They're tired of being strung out. They're tired of fighting over stuff, and I'm hoping that it makes a difference. You have some groups like Amend that's out in North Dakota and Oregon and California that are trying to introduce like the Norwegian model of prisons and the idea that we can have a greater impact on people's lives if we treat them as human beings. We can prepare them for society better if we simulate society rather than like locking them up and throwing away the key. Because I think it's really easy to say, oh, we just need to punish people, but I don't think anybody can really argue that punishment doesn't make you a better person. Like if you just take your kid and you stick him in timeout, like he may not do that thing again, but he doesn't understand why, and he doesn't understand what he should do instead, and he especially doesn't have the coping mechanisms that he need to deal with being angry or being stressed or being whatever. So like, yeah, he may not lash out anymore, but he may, turn into a guy who drinks himself to death, or he may not, do whatever behavior, but he's not giving an alternative. And so I think it's so important to have somebody, have social workers and psychologists and people who are designing this to be a positive experience and not enjoyable. It's not like we need to, hold them up in the Ritz and, treat people really well, but it's about treating people humanely and modeling good behavior. Yeah, and that is the problem. So like California is dealing with that right now. They're trying to desegregate California, and there are all kinds of issues around that because they're putting people in mixed races in the cells together, which they didn't do for the longest time, which is just based on the racist gang, prison gang stuff. But they're also like desegregating yards. So sometimes you're having like sex offenders come on regular yards, and that's not working out well for the sex offenders. And you're having like lines be crossed, and it creates issues. Yeah, so I just got an email from a buddy like 2 days ago that really kind of, it hurt because he was like, bro, you haven't written me in forever. Like, man, I see you just like fuck me. And it really hurt me because I don't have time. Like, I mean, I guess I do. I could be writing him right now, but it's like my life has taken such a different path. I still am going to write. I'm still going to take those phone calls. I'm still going to stay in touch. But especially when somebody gives me like a long task of like, hey, I need these three things and these whatever. I need you to research this. It's like, I just don't feel like I have time in the day. But at the same time, I'll drop them a note. I'll send them some money. I'll send them some books. Like things like that are just simple to do. And it's just tough because like life changes. And I didn't realize that. While I was in, I'd always hurt my feelings when somebody on the outside would not respond immediately or would not get right back to me. And now that I'm out here, I understand. I got fucking 25 people on my JPay list. And those are just guys that I'm like fairly close to. I got other people who kind of hit me up or have their family hit me up through Facebook and interact. And it's cool, and if I can help, I will. And I always try to make time to talk to family members, especially family members or somebody who's doing a serious bit of time, because that can be tough on them. But it's hard to balance it all. And then it was like when I started the nonprofit, I was like, cool, I'm just going to go teach some classes. This is going to be great. That is not how it happened at all. I mean, I had to deal with like regulations and insurance and yeah, it was a huge thing. But we started our reentry program. We did first class last week. We're going to do another class this week. This is going to be our pilot thing. We're going to do 3 months, which is going to run through the whole course. We've got, what do you call them? Surveys from before, surveys from after, so we can do kind of evidence and trying to figure out how to do that. Yeah, the balance, that's the hard part. Like I was talking to Courtney about it. I don't sleep very well. It's been a long time. Thank you. If I can raise some awareness, that's the goal. Just trying to introduce people to what it is. And I don't try to like put anybody down. I don't try to say it's all the correctional staff or it's all this or it's good or bad. I just try to highlight the fact that we have problems and they don't make sense. And if we just allow them to continue, like we're contributing to the problem, that there is a better way to do it. And I don't always know what that answer is, but at the same time, I think if we can identify a problem and we can agree on there being a problem, we can start trying to work towards change. Beyond rehabilitation. I wonder about that. There's if you listen to podcasts, and I don't usually listen to them, there was one, Sarah Marshall, I think. You're wrong about podcasts, where she talks about sex offenders. Because like the whole time I was in prison, the whole understanding was like, man, sex offenders are irredeemable. You can't change them. They're just whatever. And what she went into in this podcast really surprised me, like really changed my mind about all the evidence of what's actually happening behind the scenes. So I think there are probably individuals who are either unable or unwilling to change, and that our rehabilitative efforts probably won't help or won't make a difference. I think they're a fairly small portion of the population, but I also think that that we can't base our system around that, because that's like saying we're only going to do special education in school. Like we're not going to do like regular classes, we're not going to do honors classes, we're only going to do special education because this percentage of the population needs it. I think that prison needs to be based around the needs of the majority and have special situations or circumstances for those who either can't or may exceptionally do well or whatever the situation may be. And I think being adaptable like that makes us in a better position to have people who succeed. But, well, I've never done a YouTube live, so I wanted to see if this would work, if anybody would be here. What time is it? It's like 5 o'clock, so. Well, it's worth a try, but I figure I'll sign off. I just want to check in. Y'all take care. I appreciate all the support on the videos and even the criticism. If you don't agree with me, cool. Leave me a comment. Tell me why. I'm happy to debate or engage. When people leave like troll comments, that's different. Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. And I don't know enough about it. I mean, that's not my expertise. I got a bachelor's in psychology while I was in, but my specialty was trying to figure out like what was wrong with me. Like, how did I go from like this good, like happy kid to just being so fundamentally broken? But all right, thank you all.